So today what we're going to be covering is just basic Python fundamentals. You guys have been working thus far with JavaScript, so it's going to be a little bit different. The syntax might look a little strange at first, but generally the concepts are going to be quite similar. So as you're going through it, you're going to recognize, this is how we do it in JavaScript, this is how we do it in Python. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is just strings. All right, we saw strings, or we're seeing strings in JavaScript all the time, and we're going to see them again in Python. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to open up a terminal where we can play around with some different Python syntax. Okay, and if you guys don't know, VS Code has its own terminal that you can tap into, and I like using it all the time because when we're working on projects, it's very easy to have a terminal open down below where you can have your thing running and also debug. Yes?
Is this being recorded?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Of course. All right, cool. So let me open up a shell here. And then once you guys have installed Python, and there are installation instructions in the platform, you'll be able to open up a Python shell. So I'm going to do Python 3 because I'm on a Mac, and Macs also have Python 2 on them. Okay. All right, so now you can see I'm inside of a Python shell. Let me know if this is too small or too big. Is that big enough for you guys generally to see? Pretty good? Okay. All right, so we're just going to practice kind of printing out a couple strings. So I can say print hello. Or we'll say hello Python, exclamation point. Okay, and what does this mean when we use parentheses? You guys should know what that means from JavaScript. Say it again.
As a place for parameters? The string.
Right, but what does it indicate about what we're doing? So we have this print right here.
It's kind of like console.
Yeah, it's like console.log. What does it mean when
we're calling a function?
We're calling function, right? We're invoking it. Exactly. Very good. All right, so that's one way that we can print a string. And then here you'll see that we can also just pass in a variable. And creating variables in Python is extremely easy, so we don't need to use a var keyword or a const or a let or anything like that. We just say the name of the variable and then set it equal to something. Okay? Okay, so let's just create a variable here. And since Linda is sitting next to me, I'll say student equals Linda. Okay, and now I can say print hello student. All right, hello Linda. Okay, so that's one way to do it, and then as you can see, the other thing that we can do is we can concatenate the two strings with the plus operator, right? And we've seen that in JavaScript as well. So I can say print hello space plus student. Oops. Hello Linda. Cool, same result. All right. Then we also have this thing. Which is kind of newer. Since I believe Python 3.6, we can use what's called an F string. And what the F string allows us to do is it allows us to basically sandwich some type of variable directly inside of our string. Okay, so that makes it kind of nice, especially when we're dealing with, for instance, let's say we have a variable that's a number of some sort. We can easily use an F string to stick that number inside of our string. So if I'm trying to say print my age is, and then I just tack on, I don't know, 20. Notice how I get an error here because we can't concatenate an integer to our string. However, if I were to do that with an F string, we'll actually be able to throw those things together without what's called casting the integer into a different type. Okay, so let's try it that way. So let's say print, and then we'll say my, oops, I gotta say F at the beginning, my age is, and then I could put Oops, let's just set it to a variable first. So we'll say age equals 20, and then we'll say print f my age is, and then inside that I'm just going to do these curly braces here, so saying I'm sticking a variable inside the string, like that. Okay, so this will work the way that we expected to because I used the f string. All right, and that's what's called string interpolation. It means we're putting together parts of a string. Any questions about this?
If you put the age equals 20 below the printf line, would it still work?
No. Why not?
Does the order matters again? It reads from top to bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So we're reading from top to bottom. If I try to reference age inside here, age is undefined, right? And we can show that real easily. So if I just change this to some variable name that I haven't yet defined, I'll just call it und, like that. So notice how we get a name error right here. Und is not defined, just as expected, right? Okay, cool. Let's keep moving. There are some different things that you can do with string formatting too. I don't think you guys need to worry too much about this stuff, but you can definitely look through it in there. One kind of interesting thing is that you can use this title method. Okay, so if we call the dot title method, what that's going to do is it's going to capitalize the first letter of each word in our string. So let's just try that out real quick. So if I say print, and then I've got this string, hello world, and then I'm going to call this title method on it. Pretty nifty, right? It titleified, or something like that. I don't know what you'd call that. Okay, and then you can see down here at the bottom of the page, you've got like a whole bunch of different methods that you guys can tap into with strings. The key thing here is do not spend time memorizing this stuff, because if you find that you need to use something, it's very easy to look up. Right. All right, so let's keep going. Hello world, I think we'll skip that. Let's get into some Python syntax, because this is the important thing. So in Python, indentation is extremely important. Now in JavaScript, it's not critical. You can get away with some pretty terrible indentation, and JavaScript's not going to care in general. However, with Python, we actually need to indent our code blocks. So as you can see here, if we're doing something like, these are the different examples for code blocks. We can have a def, which means that we're defining a function. Okay. We can have an if, an elif, and an else. Can anyone guess what elif means? Else if. Yeah, exactly. We have for and while loops, which you guys have been doing in JavaScript as well. You also have class, which indicates that we're establishing some kind of class. Okay. So when we use any of these, we need to indent what comes after them, and they will be followed by colons. So here are some examples down below. X equals 10. If x is greater than 50, then we're going to print bigger than 50 right here. Else, we're going to print this. So notice how we've indented after the colon to indicate that this is a new code block. And I'm just going to show you guys what happens if we don't indent, and we'll see what kind of complaints the Python interpreter gives us here. So let's just say x equals 5. All right, and then we'll say if x equals 6, and then notice how I'm not indenting here, turn true. Okay, so see how we've gotten an error in here? What does that indicate to us?
There's something wrong with the entry.
Something wrong with what?
With that line.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, yeah, there's something wrong, but specifically what's wrong?
Indentation.
The indentation. Yeah, because I have not indented that code block, right? Okay, cool. Yes.
On the I guess the website, not the VS Code. It said space it four spaces, or Does it have to be 4 spaces, or do you just hit the indent?
Hitting tab will actually give it to you here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let's experiment with that a little bit. Also, another thing I want you guys to notice that's, again, different from JavaScript is that we do not have to set our condition inside parentheses. Okay, so if we're doing some kind of a conditional, same thing goes for while and for loops. We don't need to use parentheses with those. Okay, so let's change that. Let's say if x equals 6, and then I'll just tab out. We'll say return true, and then we'll say else return false. Oh, I'm not inside of a function. All right, so let's not return. Let's just change it. We'll just say if x equals 6, print true. We'll do it as a string, right? Else print false. Flace. Flosse. All right. Okay, so now we're good because we actually indented each code block. No errors there. So we're good, right? Any questions about indentation? No? All right. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, cool. The other thing that we can do, and this is covered down here, is if we have some code that we're going to come back to at a later time, and it requires indentation like this, if we're declaring a class, the next line is going to have to be indented, and if we don't put anything in there, we'll get some kind of an error. So let's see, let's just create class human. Whoops. Okay, notice how if I return one more time, I'm getting this indentation error because I didn't indent inside of my class. So as a way around that, what you can do is you can use this pass keyword. It's just indicating this is something that I'm going to come back to. All right. So let's say class human, and then I'll just indent there and just say pass. Now we're okay. We're back to the actual shell line there, and we didn't get any kind of errors. So that's what you can do if you've got some code that you know you're going to come back to, but it's not finished right now. All right. Let's keep going here. Yeah, so that's just an example of going through a string. Let's move on to some data types. So this is pretty important here. These are some primitive data types. So we've got Booleans, which you guys are familiar with from JavaScript. The main difference here is the casing. So notice here in Python we're actually going to be capitalizing our Booleans, which is a little different. Numbers, no problem there. You guys are familiar with those. And then we've got strings. So these are like the main things that you're generally going to be working with. Then we've got some composite types down here. Tuples. Okay, this is a type of data that is immutable, which means that it can't be modified after it's created. Okay, so we'll come across those maybe here and there, not all the time, but just know that once that tuple is there, you cannot modify it. Okay, lists are something that we're going to be dealing with all the time. You guys know what a list would be in JavaScript? What do we call a list?
Array.
An array. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. Okay, so we have these same exact concepts, but they're just called something different because we're in Python now. All right, and here are some of the different things that we can do. So we can establish a list. So we'll just set it with these square braces, just like we can do in JavaScript. We can do something to tack an item onto the end of the list using append. So that's kind of nice. We can pop. Okay. So let's practice some of these things, right? Let's just create a little list. Okay, I'll just say my list equals 1, 2, 3. Okay, and so if we want to add another number to that, I can just use this append method and throw something in there. So I can say my list append 4. Okay, and now if I print my list, there we go. I've got all 4 numbers, so that's cool. I can pop from that list. So if I go mylist.pop, so again, it's going to return back the element that you lopped off the end. And so our list should actually only have 1, 2, 3 in it now. So if I go back here, 1, 2, 3. And we can also pop, it looks like by index number, right? So if I want to pop the item at index of 1, I could just pass in a 1 there to get rid of that. So let's try that. So if I pop at index of 1, what am I going to be left with here?
1 and 3.
Correct, yeah. So the index of 1 is the number 2 right now. So let's say mylist.pop 1. Okay, yeah, so it gave us the 2 back, and then again, if I print, I'm left with a list that has 1 and 3 in it. All right, good deal. And then another thing that we're going to be dealing with all the time, quite frequently, are these things called dictionaries. Can anyone guess what a dictionary would be in JavaScript? What's the equivalent of a
Constants or
no?
An object?
Object. Yes, perfect. Yeah, so all a dictionary is just a collection of key value pairs. So it's a place that we can store some different information, and in JavaScript we call that an object because typically the information is all going to be about one thing, one object. All right? So let's go ahead and create an object. So if I want to say student again equals this dictionary, and we'll say first name, and then let's stick with Linda, right? And then we'll say her last name is Mendoza. So let's print it out. Okay, and you can see we have just our list of key value pairs here, just like you'd expect. Okay, I can also add new key value pairs to that existing dictionary. So if I say student at okay, so that's how we can add another key value pair by just putting in brackets here the name of the key and then setting that equal to some value. All right. Let's see some of the other things that we can do with dictionaries. It looks like we can actually pop a key, which is kind of interesting. So that should remove the key value pair, and it actually returns the value to us. So let's try that real quick. So if I go student.pop and then I pass in age, there you go. I got the age, and then again, if I print it out, we've now lost the key value pair for age, right? Okay, fair enough. Let's keep moving down. This is kind of a good thing to know too. So if we're ever unsure of what the type of something is, yeah, of course.
For the pop, you make the symbol pop the age, but can I pop the value of age? Like you put on the symbol age equal 30, can I pop 30 and age become blank and I can put the new value on it?
Not that I know of. So you want to pop a key value pair based on the value, not the key. Yeah, not that I know of. Yeah. If I find out otherwise, though, I'll let you know. It's an interesting question. So this next thing that we were going to talk about is just using this type function. So I can use a type function to just figure out what is something, or what type of thing am I dealing with here. So if I say type of 5, notice I get a class of int. Or if I say type of 3.5, I get a class of float. Okay.
So the other one where they had two numbers in there.
Class of string. I'm sorry. Which one where they have two numbers?
They had like
Right here.
type and then is that 2.63 or 2.63? 2.63.
2.63.
You can't feed it two parameters or two different.
No, yeah, I'm pretty sure that would throw an error. So if I say type hello 5. Oh, it takes 1 or 3 arguments. Huh. Well, in what situation would you want to feed that 3 arguments? Argument 2 must be tuple, not int. Huh, that's pretty weird. Yeah, generally, you guys are never really going to want to call it with multiple things. I mean, in fact, in your programs, you're generally not going to be using this that much at all. It's just something that can be useful if we're playing around with Python in the shell. All right. The other thing that we can do for data types that have a length attribute, and here are some examples. Lists, dictionaries, tuples, and strings. We can use the len function on those right there to just find out what is the length of that. So if I want to find out how long a string is, we can do that. So we can say len of hello is 5. Okay, and then len of student, what should that be? See if you guys are following along.
Does it need quotations?
Oh, no, I'm not doing the string. I'm doing that dictionary that we established before.
2?
2, right? Because we lopped off one of the key value pairs. There we go. And then also we had a list as well, which I think had 2 elements left in it, right? So I'll do the same thing. Len my list 2. Okay, so we can use len on string lengths, on a length of a list to find out how many items are in it. We can also use it on a dictionary if we want to find out how many key value pairs there are. All right. Any questions about that? No? All right, let's keep moving. Another example may be receiving string input from a user that we want to treat as a number. Okay, so what's going on down here? Can anyone tell me what this means? We call this int function against a user value. So user value is up here. It's the string 26, right? So what are we doing when we call this function right there?
Formatting it as a number.
We're casting it into an integer, right? So let's see what happens if we try to cast something that has a decimal in it. So let's say int, and then we'll say 26.5. So here we get an error. It's telling us it's an invalid literal for int. So we would need to start with something that actually had sort of an integer form for it to be properly cast in an integer. All right. Let's keep moving here. Next we have conditionals, which is obviously a big part of kind of any language and any programming paradigm. It's just the simple if-then, right? So if x is greater than 50, then let's print that, else we'll do this. We also have the elif, which we talked about. That just means else if. And then, of course, the else would come down at the bottom. Here are some comparison and logic operators. So if we do the double equal sign, that just means that we're checking to see if 2 operands are equal. Does the term operands bother you guys? Okay. So basically, we're just asking, are the 2 things on each side of the double equal sign equal?
Does that mean equal in data type?
Yeah, it would actually also include the type as well. So let's test something out here. So if we say we already had our student 1, right? Let's just create like a student 2. And then I'll set the key value pairs to be exactly the same. All right. So first name, and okay, last name. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out whether student 2 is equal to our original student. What do you guys think I'm going to get on that? Are they equal? Let's have hands. How many people think that they're equal? Student and student 2. Does anyone think that they're equal?
I'll be the guinea pig.
You think they're equal. All right, all right. Does anyone think that they're not equal? Hands. Who thinks they're not equal? One person? So one person thinks they're equal, one person thinks they're not. What does everyone else think?
Indecisive.
What's that?
Indecisive.
Indecisive? Well, you got it like you're leaning one way or another, no?
Yeah.
All right, fine. You guys are no fun. All right, so student equals student 2.
Yes.
Look at that.
Good job.
You took a risk and you got rewarded. So yeah, but let's print out, because he was asking, is the data type being checked as well? And we'll see, if I were to set that to a string or something, obviously we would expect that to be false, right? So print student equals student. False, right? Okay. So that's that. We have all the regular stuff. So if we want to say that or ask if two things are not equal, we would use the exclamation point equal sign. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal, and or not. So this again is a little bit different from JavaScript. Rather than the double ampersand that we would see in JavaScript, we actually have the word and, so it kind of flows off the fingers a little bit. Or we can use as well a not, okay, if I want to negate something. That's pretty much it for that. Another important concept that you guys have been seeing a lot already with JavaScript is looping through something. Okay, and there's a nice little comparison in here about how the two different syntaxes look. So let me, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me just close out this sidebar. Okay, so here, this is what a for loop would might look like in JavaScript. And a lot of times people would just do something like x plus plus rather than x plus equals 1, right? Whereas in Python, we can do these types of loops where we'd say for something in range, and then we can establish this little thing here. So the range is kind of interesting because it can take a variable number of arguments. So if we pass in just one argument for range, that means that it's going to start at 0 and it will go up to everything but excluding the very last number that we include. Okay? So I'm going to show you how this works in the terminal real quick. So if we say for I in range, and then we'll just say 10, and then I'm going to print out I. So what do we expect to see in here before I run this?
Start 0 to 9.
It's going to start at 0. Yeah, it'll go all the way from 0 to 9. Exactly. Okay, exactly as expected. If I pass in two arguments, that means that I'll basically have a start point and an end point. Okay, so let's try that. So say for I in range, we'll go say 4 up to 10. Okay, what are we expecting to see here? 4 to 9, exactly. Okay. And then if we want to pass it 3 arguments, the third argument could actually be how much we want to increment by each time through. Okay? So if I change this, let's say 4 to 10, and then I'm going to give it sort of an increment value here of 2, what would we expect to see?
460.
Very good. Exactly. You guys are quick.
Will that first part take negative numbers too?
Yes, it will. So let's try that. So for I in range, -5 up to 10. So yeah, we started at -5 and we went all the way up to 9. The other interesting thing that you can do is you can go backwards in it, which might kind of be unexpected, but it's kind of nifty. So if I want to go for I in range, we'll start at 10, go down to 0, and then my increment could be -2. What would we expect to print here?
8, 6, 4, 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything all the way down, all the evens down to 2, right? Cool. All right, so that's kind of nifty. I saw a question, yes?
I might get a dumb question just about the range function itself. Why doesn't it print the, I guess, the last number? I mean, it prints the first number, so 4 is to 10, but it doesn't print the last number in range.
I couldn't tell you about the rationale about it. All I
Yeah,
know
that's
is that that's the way that it works.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, just keep in mind that that's how it works, just in case. All right. Cool. All right, let's keep going down. Any other questions about the range before we keep moving? Kind of nifty. Again, we can move backwards. We can use negative numbers, so it comes quite in handy. Here's some different examples of how you can call it with the different number of arguments, which is what we talked about. And again, they just mentioned here an increment of +1 is going to be implied if you don't specify it. And I think the same thing would go, so if we were going negative again, let me see if I can get back to that. So where are we going downward? Okay, so if we're going from 10 to 0 and I do not specify an incrementer, I would expect that it would go down by 1, right? Let's make sure that's the case. Huh, I guess we have to specify it, right? Okay, so it's good to know if we're going backwards. Okay, so here's another thing that we can do. Looping through lists or arrays in JavaScript is a very common thing that we're going to need to do quite a bit. There are a couple different ways that we can do it in Python. One of them is really handy and comes. You guys are going to end up using it a lot in your different assignments and projects. So let's talk about that. So I'm going to create. We still have our list, I think. Let me just see what's inside that. Just had some numbers, right? Okay, 1 and 3. Let's just append something to it. MyList.append 4. Okay, so now we've got 1, 3, and 4. I just want to iterate through that list and basically print out each value in it. Okay, so let's do it in a couple different ways. So I'm going to say for I in range, and then I'm going to use the length of the list as basically my endpoint, because remember, we won't include the number that's at the end of the range. So I'll say len of my list. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out the item that's at the index of I. Okay? So the way that I can do that is I can say print my list, and then I can use my brackets to specify what index I want printed out. Okay, so therefore I get each of my elements that are in the list. So that's one way, and that's fine. That kind of looks like how we're used to doing it in JavaScript, right, for the most part. There's another way, though, that comes in handy where I don't even need to use the range or the length at all. I can simply say for some variable name in my list. And then I could just print that variable name that I'm establishing. So let's say for item in my list. Print item. So this is kind of nice. We don't need to use the index at all. We can just simply call it whatever we want, and then we'll have access to that thing inside that code block. Right? This is a very nice, friendly syntax for just running through a list. Okay? Any questions about that? So tomorrow when we do our Python Olympics, which is going to be tons and tons of fun, you guys will be using both of these, okay? And it will kind of highlight when you would want to use one versus the other, right? Okay, so we got for loops through dictionaries. This is something that we can do as well. So if we want to just print out all of the names of the keys in a dictionary, we can do for k in myDict, or we could call it key if we want, and then we can print out that key. So let's try that real quick. So we had a student dictionary, right? So let's say for key in student, oops. And then let's just print out the key. Okay, so we get the two keys, first name and last name, right? What else can we do? We can also just grab the keys themselves by calling this. So if we call the keys method, that would basically give us a list of all the keys. So let's do that. So we'll say print student dot keys. Okay. And notice that I'm getting this list in here that has all of my keys. It's got first name and last name, right? We can also do the same thing with values. So let's do that. I'll just change this to values. If I want to get all my values in the dictionary, I can do that. Not sure how often you'd really be doing that, because it's like if you're getting values with no context, how useful is that, right? Cool, I just got Linda and Mendoza. I don't know what keys those go with, though, right? Finally, the other thing that you can do if you want to loop through a dictionary but actually tap into both the key and the value, Python has kind of a nice syntax for doing that. Okay, so I can say for key val in student. Oops. And then here I'm just going to print out key plus, I'll just put a little colon in there, right? Colon space plus val. Too many values to unpack. What is that supposed to mean? We have to actually call this .items method on it. So I forgot about that. So if we're trying to loop through and get all the keys and values, just remember to tack on the .items. Okay. So let me change that real quick. So instead of student, I'm going to say student.items. And then let me see if I can get what I had. Okay. Okay. So that's kind of nifty. It gives me both the key and the value to work with for all of my key value pairs. Any questions about looping through dictionaries? Make sense to you guys? Mostly? All right, while loops. This is something you guys have seen in JavaScript. So the key thing in while loops is you have to make sure that you're changing something inside the while loop that will eventually make it so that condition is not true. So if we say while count is less than 5, what if I was not incrementing count in here?
Just goes on forever.
It never stops, right? Yeah, exactly. So you'd have a problem there. However, if we're incrementing this, then eventually we will stop, and that's what we want. Okay, so this is the basic syntax here. Excuse me. While some condition is true, colon, and then you're going to indent and then do some work inside your code block. Right? Else, there's also this while else, which is kind of interesting. So if the condition was not met, and we would still like to do something if that happens, then we could do a print else statement here, or whatever we'll want to do. Okay? So if it was never true that y is greater than 0, then we would want to do that. However, in this case, it is true. So maybe that's not really. Somehow we're still getting the final else statement. So I guess this would run. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So once this is not true, then the else will run. But I mean, really, why not just put this outside and forget about the else altogether, right? I mean, like you could just run this while loop and then afterwards print that if that's what you want to do. Anyway, that's my take on that. Loop control. So there's also a break statement which we can use, and this is something you guys may or may not have come across in JavaScript. If I want to break out of a loop before it would naturally break, I can use the break statement to do that. Right? For val and string. I don't think we're going to talk too much about this. But basically what this is doing is this is actually just looping through the letters in a string. So that's kind of a nifty thing that we can do as well. So if I want to do for, let's just call it stir in hello, I can say print stir. Okay, so notice how I've got each individual letter in that, which is kind of cool. Again, same thing as how we're iterating through lists. We get each element individually. All right, let's keep going here. There's another while loop, and then this while loop has a break in there. I don't think we're going to discuss that too much. Let's see what we got. For loop. Let's talk about functions real quick, and then we'll talk about default parameters, and then we'll be done for today. All right, so functions are quite important, and let's just talk real quick about how you actually set them up in Python. All you're going to do is you're going to use this def keyword, and then you're going to say what the name of the function is. You're going to set the parameters that the function will take, and then we've got some work in here, and then we typically return out something, right? Okay, so let's just plug this in real quick. Okay, now I've got this add function. I just want to invoke the add function against 5 and 6. Okay, works exactly as expected. It returned me out the answer. Perfect. So a little bit of talk here about parameters and arguments. So the input of a function, if we're establishing the inputs of a function, we call those parameters, and then when we actually call the function, when we invoke it, we call those arguments. Those are the things that we're passing to it, right? Trying to see if there's anything else in here that you guys need to know. Returning values. Okay, this is kind of an important point here. So a function call is equal to whatever that function returns. So if I set some variable equal to the return value of a function, then I'm going to get whatever the function gave me back, right? That's what my variable will be equal to. Okay, here's some different examples. So here what they've done is they're establishing this variable called sum1, and that's going to equal the return value of invoking add with 4 and 6. So sum1 will be equal to what? 10. Sum2 is going to be equal to 5. Okay, and then sum3 would be sum1 plus sum2, which is going to be what? 15. Exactly. Okay, let's keep going here. let's talk about default parameters and named arguments. Okay. So here, in case we want to have basically set what's called a default argument. So in other words, let's say I call this function be cheerful and I don't pass in a name or a repeat. If I specify those default values, I can still run my logic inside the function because I've specified them as default. So I'll still have something. I won't have nothing, right? That can come handy if you know that generally I'm always going to invoke this function with some particular, or I'm typically going to use a specific value. I can put that in as a default, okay? And then, of course, that could be overwritten if I call the function some other way. So if I say, let's redefine add real quick. So let's say def add, and then we'll say num1 equals 6. Num2 equals 5. And then again, I'm just going to return num1 plus num2. So now I can actually invoke this without passing anything in, right? I could just say, hey, let's add. Let's call add. And we get 11. Okay. The other thing that we can do is we have what's called named arguments, which means that I can actually pass in these arguments out of order if I want to. Okay, so normally, like in JavaScript, if num1 is in that first position, we have to invoke it in that same exact way. But here in Python, since we have named arguments, I could say add. Actually, let's. I'm going to change the function here. So let's just say def new func is going to take in arg1, arg2. Okay, and then inside that, I'm going to print arg1 and then arg2. Okay, but what if I want to call this call this function and I want to pass in arg2 in the first position and arg1 in the second position? We may actually be able to do that. So let's try it out. So let's say new func, and then I can say arg2 equals this, arg1 equals that. Okay, so before we actually run this, what are we expecting is going to happen here?
Let's say that is.
Should be that this, right? Because inside my function, I'm printing arg1 first and arg2 second. And then when I called it, I'm calling arg1 is going to be that. So it should be that this, right? So let's do that. Okay, exactly as expected. So we can use named arguments if we want to call something with arguments out of order. And I think they talk about that a little bit here. Defaults, one unnamed. These are just kind of some different situations that you might run into that you guys can read up on. So that's pretty much it for the day. You guys got any questions? Sleepy? No questions. Yeah. Let's have thumbs on this. Okay, we got a system, guys. Here's the system. When I ask for thumbs, this means you all feel good about it. This means like, I don't know, not so great. Obviously, that means it's not good, right? Okay, let's have thumbs. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's honest. All right. Up. Where are you at, man? Sideways. All right. Sideways. Up. Baxter, you're up.
Up.
Good. Okay. Cool. Clarifications here, you guys.
So,
Anything particular like throwing you off or bugging you?
I just have to practice it a few times because
Usually
I
that's
haven't gotten into it. I could see how learning the algorithms helps understand. Yeah.
Yeah, because the logic is going to be quite similar. It's just that the syntax will be a little bit. Cool. Okay, cool. But no specific things that seemed troublesome for you guys at all. Mainly makes sense. Okay. Excellent. Well, I'll give you the rest of the day to work on your assignments, and I'll be out there with you guys, so you guys can come up to me at any time with any question. I'm there for you. All right. Let's have a good day.